I'm Faz Shakir.
I'm Amanda Littman, and this is Battleground. Faz is still gone this week, spending time with his very cute new baby. This week on Battleground, we're talking to Mike Rothschild, author of The Storm Is Upon Us, How QAnon Became Movement, Cult, and Conspiracy Theory of Everything. Mike Rothschild, welcome to Battleground.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to talk with us about everyone's favorite topic, QAnon. You are an expert and author of a recent book that came out called The Storm Is Upon Us, How QAnon Became a Movement, Cult, and Conspiracy Theory of Everything. So why don't you give us a little bit of the TLDR on what QAnon is, how it's changed, what's going on at the moment?
So the basics of QAnon are that there is a supposed military intelligence team called Q, using a variety of extremely awful message boards to leak cryptic clues and rhetorical questions leading up to a massive purge of the deep state by President Donald Trump. Now, as you can tell by the part that it hinges on President Donald Trump doing stuff, that's not really what QAnon is anymore. And it's kind of morphing really day by day at this point. But the very basics of it, what it was from the first of those drops, as they're called, made on 4chan in late October 2017, up until Joe Biden's inauguration, was that there was a military intelligence team using this image board to let patriots and Trump devotees know what was about to happen and how to prepare for it and how they could play a part in enacting this great purge and fighting this secret war between good and evil. Well, the war is over to most people and Biden became president, except of course they don't believe that Biden is president, or they don't believe that Biden will be president for much longer. So the prophecy of QAnon was originally that there would be a great purge of the deep state called the Storm. That has now changed its shape, but it's still a prophecy. What it is now is that Trump will be restored to office. Something magical will happen that has no foundation in US law, and Trump will be reinstated as president, and then presumably he will get back to the business of eventually purging the deep state. They're still trusting the plan. The plan is just a little more complicated now than it was 7 months ago.
There's some webs of the conspiracy theory that get a little bit complicated.
Yeah. Q really works because it's much more of a sort of an umbrella of conspiracy theories rather than one. I mean, that's why the subtitle for the book is The Conspiracy Theory of Everything, because that's really what Q is. There is, old school anti-Semitism that's been around for centuries. There's the satanic panic. There's political conspiracy theories of the 2016 election. There are, you can get into aliens. You can get into suppressed cures for diseases. You can get into secret technology. You can get into galactic federations of light. Anything you want can be found under QAnon. So it really wasn't a surprise to me when these people started showing up at school board meetings screaming about how vaccines were poison and how masks are slave muzzles. Everything has been kind of merged together under one giant mythology that is now becoming conservative orthodoxy. So even talking about what QAnon is at this point, when you're talking about QAnon, you're really just talking about what a lot of Republicans believe.
You get to something really interesting, which is that the Venn diagram between the Republican Party and QAnon, while not a perfect circle, there are the core activists of the Republican Party at this point are made up in large part, I think, at least based on my understanding, of people who ascribe to at least some part of the QAnon ideology or the QAnon conspiracy theories.
Yeah, they will not identify as QAnon believers. In fact, they will say, I'm not one of those crazy Q people. But then they say things that are exactly in line with QAnon. They'll talk about the deep state, trafficking. We got to save the children. They'll make insinuations that Joe Biden maybe doesn't know where he is at any given point. I mean, this is all just basic QAnon stuff. And what's happening is the really lurid stuff, the sex trafficking and the satanic rituals, that stuff is being kind of sanded down in favor of a much more mainstream, much more vanilla version of the conspiracy theory that's always been in American politics. That there's a string-pulling cabal, you can call it the deep state, you can call it the Illuminati, you can call it the New World Order. the Bilderbergs, the Trilateral Commission. There's always something or multiple somethings that are actually pulling the strings. Those people are running things. Those people are deciding who needs to take vaccines, who's going to be the real president and all that stuff. And Q adapts very quickly to it. It's a very adaptable set of beliefs and of mythology.
I saw a study that I think in at least December of last year, something like 17% of Americans believed in sort of the core QAnon mythology. Can you paint me a picture of sort of your like typical Q believer?
Sure. One thing about Q believers is that there is no one racial or socioeconomic demographic. They tend to be white, mostly white. They tend to be middle class or upper middle class. They tend to be somewhat educated, some college, some, beyond college, but they're all over the place. The biggest sort of commonality that these people have is that they already believed in conspiracy theories. So one of the things that I found in talking to the family members of Q believers is that these people were already radicalized by something. They were 9/11 truthers. They were Obama birth certificate truthers. They were, Trump Spygate truthers. A lot of them got turned on to conspiracy theories when Obama was elected or when Trump was elected. They were already there. Q was just the next rung on the ladder toward being completely engulfed in this world.
It does strike me as sort of an outgrowth of like the social media landscape that has changed pretty wildly, that allows this stuff to move so quickly through the ecosystem, overlaid with sort of a lack of media literacy and understanding how the Facebook algorithm or how news sources might be playing to your interests. Can you dig in on that a little bit?
Sure. So one of the questions I get a lot is, what is the culpability of the social media giants in all of this? And then, sort of, are we more conspiratorial now, or is it just easier to find? And I think that we are about as conspiratorial as we've always been. There's research that about the same number of people believed that a conspiracy killed John F. Kennedy in 1963 as they do in 2013. So we always have believed that stuff, but it's easier to find now. It takes a lot less work. There's no barrier to entry now. You can go on Facebook in 5 seconds and find any conspiracy theory you want that backstops any belief you want. And media literacy is a big part of that. We found that boomers are much more likely to share fake stories on Facebook. They're much more likely to trust the things that they read as being true. Even though we know that the internet is full of garbage, full of lies, full of just fake clickbait stories. Older generations are still used to being told the truth by the media. But at the same time, you can't just pin it on boomers. I mean, it's younger people too who just believe the things they want to believe. This is not just a boomer thing anymore. Q got very popular with boomers at the beginning, but we're way past that now.
How much of this was spurred by the pandemic and a lot of people being home online and really finding community online for a year and a half?
A huge part of it was. I really thought that getting into 2020, Q was really starting to recede. But with the pandemic, suddenly everybody was a conspiracy theorist. Everybody was trapped inside almost overnight by a virus of whom our understanding was changing day by day. Nobody quite knew what was going on. And when that happens, we look for easy answers to our questions. And even more than that, we look for someone to blame. We look for a person or a group that we can point to and say, you did this to us. This is your fault. So we looked for it to be a bioweapon. We looked for it to be a lab leak. We looked at George Soros. We looked at 5G internet. We were looking for things to blame. And Facebook offered groups to people who were looking for people to blame.
Thanks for watching. You can get the full episode of Battleground on the Recount streaming daily or listen to it wherever you get your podcasts.